Welcome to the basketball party. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Michael Bloomberg joins the ownership squabble, and we address the obligatory offseason cat trade rumors today on the Minnesota basketball party.
This is Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Timberwolves talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota basketball party on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Wolves talk every Wednesday. We're back at it on the Minnesota basketball party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Thanks a lot for joining us today, whether you are live on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Please subscribe, watching us there on demand, or listening to us on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. That includes the SiriusXM app, by the way. And by the way, Ben Beacon produces great, in-depth daily Wolves content on that Locked On Wolves podcast feed. He is among our panel of experts today on a show that will dive into the Michael Bloomberg addition to the A-Rod Lowry ownership team, Karl-Anthony Towns' offseason status. This is becoming an annual rite of passage. What do the Wolves do with Cat? And we'll get into the Wolves' notable unrestricted free agents, what to do with them on a limited budget. We address all that today, but first we meet our panel of experts with the opening tip.
I'm Ben Beacon, host of the daily Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll talk a little bit today about Karl-Anthony Towns, and I'll talk about why I don't think the Wolves will trade him this offseason despite the cap implications.
And I'm Ron Johnson, former Gophers wide receiver, Gopher Hall of Famer, and host of the Ron Johnson Show on Locked On Sports Minnesota. And I want to talk about why Anthony Edwards is continuing to show us he is the Michael Jordan, but there's something the Bulls did to help Jordan get a championship. Will they do that for Anthony Edwards?
I'm Jack Borman, soon-to-be former editor-in-chief of Canis Lupus and co-host of the Locked On Wolves postcast with my man Luke Inman. And I'm going to be getting into a little bit why I think that it's going to be a relatively quiet offseason for the Timberwolves outside of making a couple draft selections here later this month.
I'm Reggie Wilson, sports director at Care 11. And unlike Jack, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a loud offseason, but not because of the moves that they have on the court, but some of the ownership stuff.
Some compelling teases there, and we'll start where Reggie ended with the ownership squabble. Since our last show, I think this broke either the day of or the day after we did our last show, Michael Bloomberg, 12th richest man in the world, joins the ownership team. And I think in addition to that, there were reports in the story about some of the intentions of Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry. Chiefly, they want to spearhead a new sports network locally. That obviously is going to take a lot of cost, a lot of effort, but it's actually much needed in this market. The Wild need a home. The Twins need a new TV home. And of course, the Timberwolves need a TV home as well. So that could be a pretty huge deal. Secondly, they're targeting an arena being built by 2031. And Michael Bloomberg joins and wants to buy out Glenn Taylor. These are all the notable bullet points from the report. Is this them getting a step ahead? Because it seems to me like they're still going over the fine print of the contract. They need to win arbitration against Glenn. They need to get the Board of Governors vote. What is the point of Bloomberg? What does it mean for the ownership bid? Since Reggie brought it up, I'll kick it to Reggie first. What's the deal with Michael Bloomberg?
Yeah, so right now on care11.com and on Care11 YouTube, you can watch the conversation that I had with John Krasinski. The day that story broke, he and Shams broke that story that day. So, of course, I had to talk to him about it. And it's very layered, very, very layered. But some of the bullet points of when he was talking to me, as you said, Sam, 2031 could be the earliest that they could try to get going on this stadium deal, possibly down by the farmers market in Minneapolis, which I'm just trying to logistically see how that works. I know they can do anything, but that's like a one-way road right there.
You're not taking my farmers market. Stand in front of the bulldozer.
The farmers market stays, but it's just a weird area. The highway is literally right there. So I'm interested to see what that would look like. But also the sports network. You know, some of the guys that are involved in this prospective ownership group, you know, they've had experience with the Yes Network and, you know, creating networks before. So that's something that they are looking into as well. That could be a home not just of the Wolves and Lynx, but could be the home of the Twins and maybe the Wild too, if they are successful in some of the things that they, you know, want to do in developing a new network. And then also just it's interesting because I was asking John, like, what does this mean as far as like who feels like they have the upper hand? And this arbitration, to pay off the tease, this arbitration is going to go well into the summer. It may be before the season starts, right before, or it may be, you know, a couple months from now that we find out, you know, what exactly is going to be the fate of each ownership group. And it's funny because I'm like, okay, Michael Bloomberg joins the, you know, the A-Rod Lowry ownership group, but if the judge rules in favor of Glenn and he will no longer sell that portion to A-Rod and Lori, then it's all moot, as John said. But what's interesting is both sides are jockeying in different ways. He was mentioning how, you know, A-Rod and Lori, they're doing this with Bloomberg, and that would mean him buying out the rest of Glenn's stake in the team, as opposed to Glenn keeping that 20% that he was trying to when the sale initially was agreed upon. And then also on Glenn's side, he look, I'll pay into the luxury tax. So both sides are saying that they'll pay into the tax, and A-Rod and Lori getting Bloomberg pretty much allows them to do that because he's the 12th richest man in the world, 106 north of $106 billion net worth. And so this whole thing is very interesting, but I think because of the ownership situation, it's going to be quite the theatrical offseason for the Wolves, and I'm interested to see how it all plays out. But Bloomberg joining is not like a small deal, it's a big deal, but it's all moot if the judge doesn't rule in A-Rod and Lori's favor, because then, you know, they're stuck with the percentage of the team that they have now, and it won't move forward.
Yeah, Ben, you had some interesting thoughts in our text thread where you thought maybe the Bloomberg move is sweetening the pot, so to speak. If they get through arbitration and they get to the Board of Governors vote, this might be something to create appeal with the rest of the league so that they win that vote, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it credibility is the biggest thing. I mean, everybody knows that name. I mean, it's a guy who's the mayor of the biggest city and 12th richest man in the world, as Reggie said, and you know, media mogul, and ran for president, you know, a few years ago. So like everybody knows who he is. It adds credibility, and obviously like everybody at all the Board of Governors guys they're all rich, they're all famous on some level, but this is a name that like it helps them in the court of public opinion. And I'll let someone else speak more to the team owners and the Board of Governors, but I do think it helps there in terms of credibility. But in terms of the court of public opinion, which is very important to Lorian Rodriguez, we saw the media tour they went on following the you know, all the stuff that happened back in the late winter, early spring, initially when this got messy. Like they want the public opinion to be on their side, and they don't have to work too hard to do it. Although, you know, there's been a lot of jokes about, why would you buy a team if you don't have the cash and all this stuff. But now they don't have that problem. And so now there's a name and there's additional capital. They'll have liquidity. Like if they, and I know Lori talks about having liquid assets, et cetera, but now they really have liquidity with Michael Bloomberg. So if this thing goes through and they win arbitration, which is an if, obviously, as Reggie said, and then if they get approved by the league, which this helps there too, then they've got money moving forward. And there's no question that public and I'm sure they're assuming Wolves fans are going to be on the side of Lori Rodriguez Bloomberg and be like, hey, these guys know what they're doing. They've got the money, they've got the name, they've got the vision. They're more likely, even though Glenn says he'll pay the tax, like now they really do have the money to do it. Glenn's a billionaire, but now you have two billionaires on the other side of things. And also just given how aggressive they were leading the charge for Tim Connolly and the the acquisition of Rudy Gobert, they've shown that they're going to be aggressive. And now also this other, down the road, whether it's the arena or the media, the TV deal, they're being aggressive and progressive in what they're trying to do moving forward. And this, again, it goes back to credibility and then also flexibility in terms of the capital that Bloomberg adds to the group. So I think it helps them in a number of ways. And obviously, as Reggie alluded to, doesn't have any impact on the arbitration. So it becomes somewhat moot if they don't win, and then they only have the 36% or whatever it is, and Bloomberg's just part of that group. But if they do win arbitration, it is a big deal.
Ron, a lot of rich people battling for power. It feels like only one group is going to be left standing. I don't see a world where these two sides coexist, running this team for the next 5 years. It's just hard to imagine they all stick around. There's got to be a winner here, and I wonder if Bloomberg kind of pushes A-Rod and Laurie over the top.
I mean, not only push them over the top, I think the biggest thing is follow the money. You go back to Steve Ballmer, you go back to Michael Jordan, sometimes there's fame and name, and then there's money. Bloomberg brings you both. And I think that's the key here. A-Rod is the name and fame similar to a Michael Jordan with money, but not as much as Bloomberg. Glenn Taylor is worth $2.8 billion. Bloomberg is worth $106 billion. And what he does, every day he touches other billionaires. He can, whether it's through spider webs of money, whether it's through the Bloomberg report, whether it's through his Bloomberg LP financial services, his information software media, he has the ability to create and print money. He has the ability to come up with ways to enrich an organization, to enrich a city. And the things he can do, create a media outlet, those are things that Glenn Taylor would probably want to do, but can't do. If Glenn Taylor could do it all over again and he could see the future, he would say, man, I need to partner with Michael Bloomberg. It's too late. Bloomberg is now on the other side of the table. The best thing he can do to save face, because one, money is no object to Bloomberg. He would be willing to pay, call it whatever you want, $3 billion, knowing 2 new teams are coming to the league, knowing he can create a media outlet that, I mean, I'm pretty sure he looks at social media and Twitter and the people that hate some of the ways the Timberwolves and Twins games are broadcasted. If he comes up with a way to even figure out, like, we can make money on this, the sky is the limit for him. So his buy-in is not just the team. His buy-in is a market. He's trying to figure out how, and then from there, he's now in one of the richest fraternities in America when you talk about these other owners and how they operate and how they do business together as a group and how they, have their funds in the TV rights and XYZ. So I don't see really a out for Glenn Taylor that helps him look good, because keeping the team now is the worst possible solution because they have the money that he claimed they didn't have. And so other than that, now it's just he wants more money. Well, then be honest. Now you have to show your cards, and I think that's where we're going to be. He's going to have to show his cards of what he wants. He said it wasn't money. It was that he didn't want them to do X, Y, and Z to the team. But now they have the money to pay what was in their contract. So we'll see where they go from there.
Yeah, Jack, let me ask you one quick question, then I'll let you cook. So with the part of them buying out Glenn completely, from what you know about the dealings, do they have the right to do that within the contract? Because why would Glenn agree to that when he can sell that 20% for double to a different stakeholder? Do you know anything about that part of it?
I don't know with 100% certainty, but I'm pretty sure that there was a clause that was in the initial contract that would allow for them to completely buy out Glenn if that's what everybody involved wanted to have happen. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I think we've all focused so much more about can they just get majority control before getting complete control. I think there was something in there about they would be able to buy out all of Glenn's LPs, but I'm not sure about Glenn specifically. But yeah, I think, again, do you really think that Michael Bloomberg would get in on the Timberwolves and Lynx ownership if he wasn't pretty confident and those around him weren't pretty confident that Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez were going to come out the other side of this arbitration? Like, even if you're talking about the court of public opinion, I still just have a really hard time getting to the fact that Bloomberg would join this thing if it wasn't going to go Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez's way. Glenn Taylor, the only thing that Glenn Taylor has going for him is that he was the chair of the Board of Governors from 2008 to 2012, and again from 2014 to 2017. So he obviously has good rapport with the majority of these governors of all these teams. I know that there are definitely some teams that have changed hands in recent years when you think about the Suns and the Jazz and the Mavericks. So there's certainly some new faces, but not enough that would swing it in any direction. And Glenn Taylor now finally is just saying he's willing to do the bare minimum of paying the luxury tax to try to help keep this team near the top of the Western Conference. That is the only thing that has come out. Have you heard Glenn Taylor or anybody on the Taylor ownership side of the house present any type of plan for moving this franchise forward? No, you haven't.
No.
And I think if I'm an owner, let's say I'm the owner of the Miami Heat or the Atlanta Hawks or the Wizards or some random team, where all I care about is, are you going to appreciably contribute more money to the overall bottom line of the league that will in turn put more money in my hand? And I think unquestionably that the side that I would take in that is Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez. They've presented plans that are going to drive both of these franchises forward with a new arena. I don't think you would start to hear leaks about where a new arena might be, at least as loudly as they've become, if you didn't feel pretty solid about that plan and have talked to really important stakeholders involved in making a decision like that, nor would you put a year on it. I also don't think that you would get as far down the line as it seems they have with a new regional sports network. I think everybody knows that business model, at least how it is presently with Bally Sports, is an abject disaster. And you look at some success stories. I mean, you look at what the Wizards have done, what Ted Leonsis has done with Monumental Sports Network, airing Capitals, Wizards, and Mystics games on that network has been great. You saw what the Jazz did. The Jazz kind of started their own broadcast service that allowed fans to purchase access to games and a whole lot more behind the scenes content as well for a subscription price every single month, where you don't have to deal with blackouts and all this other garbage that fans continually have to deal with. And then you look at what Matt Ishbia did with the Suns. He just said, I'm going to put every game on public access TV where it's available for everybody that has an antenna. And if you don't have an antenna or you have no way of accessing the games, I'm going to give them to you for free. So you can, watch these games, become a fan, and in turn, hopefully come to more games, spend more money on merchandise and all the rest of it. I just think that it seemed really odd to me that Michael Bloomberg would join this ownership group if he didn't feel extremely confident that Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez were going to come out the other side of it. And it just seems like they have so much more of a detailed plan for how they want to move these franchises forward. Whereas Glenn Taylor, I think, and those around him, obviously there's things that haven't come out publicly. Maybe there's plans privately, but he sure seems fine with, staying in Target Center and just barely doing the bare minimum of paying the luxury tax and trying to keep Tim Connolly around for another year. That's another part of it too. Like, Tim Connolly very clearly does not want to work for Glenn Taylor. Yeah. Not signing a long-term extension when you've built this thing and this is a contender and you have a super bright future. You have an incredibly talented and deep roster, an incredibly talented and deep front office, and you don't want to sign a long-term contract extension. That just scream, and you're just kicking the can down the road 1 year, because again, you probably feel pretty confident that Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez are going to become majority owners at that point, where then you'll sign a very lucrative contract. I mean, it's just crazy to me how everything here is pointing to Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez, and people, I guess, still like we're having doubts about all this stuff. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, if you were just doing like a pros and cons, or how many points are in this column and how many points are in that, I mean, it's crazy how lopsided this is right now.
No doubt about it. Yeah, superb analysis. A lot of tentacles here, and we'll be following it every step of the way here on the Minnesota Basketball Party. Next, we address the elephant in the room, the Karl-Anthony Towns off-season trade murmurs, an annual tradition unlike any other. That's next. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all have stress in our lives. Some of it's big, some of it's small. I might be stressed about this ownership situation and the local sports network situation, but some of us have issues that are bigger than our favorite sports teams. And therapy is a good way to get those things off your chest and work through whatever is weighing you down, affecting you negatively, just getting in your brain space that you want to get out. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, very convenient, very flexible, suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Make sure that that is a good fit for you. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Minnesota basketball party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Please subscribe. We would appreciate that. And listen to Ben Beacon, the Locked On Wolves podcast feed as well. And check out the rest of our programming here at Locked On Sports Minnesota. Minnesota football party on Mondays and Thursdays. The Ron Johnson Show Tuesdays. Roundtable on Fridays with our Care 11 stars. Let's go to Ron Johnson first and talk Karl-Anthony Towns. We have been talking about a cat trade for several years now, and he's again going to be the fixture of those rumors this offseason. Not only because of his expense, but in case they wanted to shake up this roster, they don't believe they can win with Cat. That would be maybe another motivation. Now, Ron, last offseason, I think you were in the camp of you would have shaken it up. You would have traded one of the big guys, probably either Carl or Rudy. How you feeling now going into this offseason?
Excuse me. I've said the same thing. So I kind of tease this that Anthony Edwards is possibly the up and coming Michael Jordan. When you look at the Anthony Edwards Adidas commercial, there's all those Spike Lee jokes about, I think I forgot somebody else said he's not. Forgot the guy, but he said not the face of the league. He's an all-star to me, but not a superstar. Anthony Edwards is, he's making all these comments. The one thing the Bulls did, and people forget this, at this stage in the Bulls' career for Michael Jordan, he still was looking for a Scottie Pippen. He hadn't gotten him yet. Not to say Karl-Anthony Towns can't be that, but Karl-Anthony Towns can't be that. Karl-Anthony Towns is a guy that every night, if he put into his mind, he could go 20 and 20 with rebounds and points. Easily 20 and 15. But Karl-Anthony Towns has to want to do it. Karl-Anthony Towns has to not always think he has to be the best big man shooter in the NBA. He has to come up with a more well-rounded game than just that, because he's there when it matters, but then sometimes he disappears. Like he's there when you're like, oh yeah, he's getting it. But then they're like, you're already down 3-0 in this. Like, where was this in game 1? Where was this in game 2? And so Scottie Pippen just became consistent. So in my opinion, I would be okay with trading Karl-Anthony Towns if you look at but the problem is who can you trade him for? Now there's the Toronto Raptors. They're saying you can get Grady Dick, Bruce Brown, and Jacob Polt. Does that help them? I don't know. Karl-Anthony Towns to the Brooklyn Nets, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, and some draft picks. Is there a draft pick guy that can come in and be a Scottie Pippen? And then there's the Bulls, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, and Nikola Vukovic. So those 3 options there right away, none of them look good to me. None of them look like, yeah, let's go make that trade. I don't think any of those guys become Scottie Pippen. So is this one of those trade and get draft pick situations and try to draft more guys to fill in for what Anthony Edwards can be? I've also said keep Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns and get rid of Rudy Gobert. I love the defense, but I think they do need another scorer. I don't know where, quote unquote, that guy comes from, but I don't know. Trading Cat to me for what's out there just is what out there. If there was something out there that was worth it, I would say do it, but it doesn't feel like there is right now.
Yeah, with a contract this expensive, Jack, it's not easy to make it work. You have to take salary back in that trade, most likely, unless you're trading into cap space, and most teams can't just absorb $50 million per year or up to $60 million by the end of it. So if you're making this trade, I mean, you're trying to get pieces in return that you think fit your roster better, and it's you'd be trying to shoot the eye of a needle to make this thing work.
Yeah, no question about it. I think the other part of this too that I don't think enough people are talking about is that Mike Conley, I believe, is going to be 37 or 38 years old on opening night. Rudy Gobert, I think, turns 32 this summer. So like the window with the roster as presently constructed is a lot shorter than I think people are realizing that it is. And that's not, and look, like the basis of what you have moving forward is concretely is Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. Everything after that, I think, is negotiable one way or the other. And so the window to build around those two guys and be able to remake this roster in some capacity that can still contend is obviously much larger and longer than the duration of Mike Conley's, the rest of his career, and the rest of Rudy Gobert's prime, whatever that ends up becoming. And so when you frame it that way, I think you have to think, can you trade Karl-Anthony Towns for either a player or a collection of players that is going to either match Karl's production or, meet it in the aggregate? And I struggle to find a deal out there, because given Karl's contract, I think it's hard to, for me at least, to get to the point of thinking that you could get 3 or 4 first-round picks back for Karl-Anthony Towns in a way that you can recoup some of what you are sending out in the Gobert trade. And so I'm with Ron. I just struggle to get there. I also, you have to think about who's at the negotiating table here. It's Tim Connolly. He's an extremely patient guy. I mean, we all thought that D'Angelo Russell would get traded in the offseason, but he ended up waiting until the deadline, and he ended up being the guy say, no, you give me more second-round picks. And that's exactly what happened. So I just don't foresee Tim Connolly operating, negotiating from a position of weakness, I guess, which you certainly could perceive, the clock ticking down until Karl's Supermax extension kicks in. But you know what? I also think that people forget just like how great Karl was in the early part of the season and everything that he did to make this whole thing work. Like, could you make an argument that, you'd want to get more production from a guy you're paying a Supermax contract to? Absolutely. There's no question about it. I think everybody would hope that. But at the end of the day, like, Karl-Anthony Towns was an all-star this season. Karl-Anthony Towns came back probably 2.5-3 weeks sooner than everyone thought he would. And outside of that one play, I think it was against Denver, where his knee really looked like it might have been given out on him. Everybody forgot that he had a meniscus injury because he was that good in the playoffs. And it's extremely rare for someone to undergo meniscus surgery of any kind and play at the level that he did, especially defensively in the first 2 series. So I certainly think that Karl did enough this season to warrant running it back when you consider, that you need this team to be as good as it can in the interim. And then maybe once Mike's contract runs out, or you start to see Rudy Gobert, noticeably decline in a way that, obviously is a little bit more, telling than it was last season, because I think it was a little bit more obvious that was just a lingering injury that he needed to recover from. So yeah, is it realistic? I think it's a realistic conversation to have, certainly. But do I see it happening? I'd be pretty shocked.
Yeah, it is a rare opportunity in the NBA to take a contender that made the Western Conference Finals and then get back your top 7 guys. They have an opportunity to bring back basically everybody that mattered. And
and you'd be mortgaging a lot of goodwill that you've just built up with the fan base too. And I think it would be a tough sell to the fan base too, to trade the guy that's been here the longest.
100%. Reggie, where do you stand?
So it's interesting that you say that, Jack, because it feels like it would be, ripping up some goodwill. But I feel like Cat has been one of the more polarizing figures in Minnesota sports, because people were praising him for his play in those first 2 series. And then, man, how quickly they turned on him. People were like, trade him, get rid of him. We're ready to see him go. Like, the discourse on social media was kind of crazy how things just changed. And, I know it's a what have you done for me lately type of a league, but, he was so criticized, not just by, folks on social, but national pundits. I remember talking to Vincent Goodwill, and he was kind of down on him. TNT, I mean, not just trashing the Timberwolves, but specifically trashing like Rudy and Cat for their play in the Western Conference Finals. And it's as you said, it's pretty rich just because like he did come back from that injury and he did play well this year, trying to figure out his role in this offense that was kind of middling this season. So my thing too is those trades that Ron mentioned just made me feel queasy. Like none of those felt good. None of them felt like trades that you're like, oh yeah, I feel good about those trades. And honestly, like none of the trades really make you feel good from a standpoint of getting value back, as opposed to just being like a salary dump with his supermax kicking in this offseason. It just like I feel like if you were to get rid of Cat, that's really what it would be, is a salary dump, just trying to get rid of a salary that is pretty ballooned on your roster. And if you're just gonna do that, I would just say get him in the gym with Corliss, get him in the gym with KG, somebody like that, and just get him to play more like a big man. I was talking to some coach, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, and they were like, unless he was hot, I wouldn't allow Cat to shoot more than 1-3 a game or 1-3 a quarter. And I'm just like, man, that seems, kind of harsh for, the best shooting big man of our generation. But I think the tough part is you have a guy who's 7 foot who, coming into the league showed a lot of promise as a big man. And now he's really just good with taking threes and picking his spots to drive into the paint, drawing charges and things like that, which is not a very efficient basketball player. And then you look at places like Denver and, all these other Cleveland and teams that have big men who are playing off the pick and roll well with each other. I think Jack mentioned that last week, him and Ant being able to be a little bit more complimentary off the pick and roll. Like, I think the best case scenario is not trading Cat, but just having him get in the gym and working on being a better overall player and not just being a player who's a 7 foot guard taking threes and driving in the lane and kind of out of control and getting charge calls. So I think that's the best case scenario, but trading him just doesn't seem like you get the type of value that you get for a guy of his caliber being an all-star. But also, if you're going to keep a guy at the number that he has, like, he has to be more of an all-around player to help move this team past the Western Conference Finals into a perennial championship contender.
Ben, take us home on this. Cat, you said early on in your opening tease that you think he's sticking around.
Yeah, and I've talked about this a lot, and we'll continue to talk about it a lot on Locked On Wolves this offseason. And I agree with, I think, the overarching theme of what everybody said so far. I don't think he gets traded. I think the only reason he would be traded is because you're worried about the cap, right? Like, you're worried about the second apron, and it's a legit thing to worry about. But you don't rock the boat on a conference finals team whose best player is 22 unless you absolutely have to, unless their hand is forced. If Glenn wins and he goes, but something terrible where it's like, okay, they just got to make a change. It's trading Cat or it's trading Nas, and we think we can get more for Cat or whatever. Like, if you're going to get under that second apron, that's the only reason you do this. I mean, clearly the fit worked to the extent that they got to the conference finals. A couple people already alluded to Cat's defense and the work he put in on that side of the floor. The way that he came back from injury, the way he defended in the playoffs and switched from like the Cat as a defender, the meme of Cat as a defender has always been much more dramatic than the reality. Like, he's had some pretty poor defensive years, but he's never been a disaster. And he's incrementally improved in all these different schemes over the last several years. He keeps being asked to do different things, and he keeps getting better at the same time. And so we saw him guard Kevin Durant admirably in the first round. Then we saw him guard Nikola Jokic really well in the second round. And the Mavs matchup was a little bit more difficult because, what were you going to do with him? And there were other matchup issues in that series anyway. But Cat doing everything he's asked and getting better while he's doing it. There certainly were some areas where he took half steps back this year. We saw, attacking off the dribble wasn't as fruitful this season as it had been in the recent past, but he shot the three better this year than he did in his abbreviated campaign last year. And we know he's, one of the best shooters in the league, full stop. And so there's no issue with him shooting a ton of threes. He probably should shoot more. And Chris Finch has said that. I also wouldn't mind him getting more post touches because he is really good in the post. That's just not a part of the Wolves offense right now. So I think he's on the team moving forward. I think that, it's about, and I think Jack, said this at the beginning of his part a minute ago. It's really about windows, right? I mean, like Golden State's a recent example of a team that reinvented themselves on the fly, adding Kevin Durant, won again. Took a few years where they weren't very good. They had a 15-win season in there somewhere, and then they come back and win a title again with Andrew Wiggins and a slightly tweaked roster still around Steph Curry. So that's obviously an extreme example, and we're talking about a team that won 4 titles. The Wolves haven't even been to the finals yet, but that's what you have to do. It's create these windows. And with Rudy and with Mike Conley, they now have a window that you have to keep open as long as you can, and then you have to find a way to, as gracefully as possible, transition to that next window where Ant is still your best player, but the players around him need to be, up to par with what you're trying to do. And the best way to keep this window open is to pay the tax and to keep Karl-Anthony Towns and run it back next year.
Good stuff from all. After this, we decide what to do with the 3 primary unrestricted free agents on the Timberwolves. That's next on the Minnesota Basketball Party. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's summertime, and that means baseball. That means the end of the NBA Finals. You can bet it all at FanDuel. They've juiced the pot for you. Now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets, not $150. They've increased it to $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if you're eyeing up the Celtics series price right now, yeah, it's minus 770. You're going to win like 2 cents on it. But if you win that $5 bet on the Celtics to finish off the finals, then you get $200 in bonus bets. And once you've got that, then the world is your oyster. You can spread it around on future bets, props, money lines, run lines, whatever you want. FanDuel.com/lockdown, FanDuel.com/lockdown. Add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Speed round time. There are 3 Minnesota Timberwolves free agents that I would like to discuss. I would like to hear what you would do with them. And yes, money is an issue with the Timberwolves. We know this. They're way over the cap. So affordability would come into play here. Let's just kick that a little bit to the side and just talk about whether you would want this player back to help kind of keep the team together. We'll start with Monte Morris, the guy they acquired via trade mid-season. We'll start with Ben. Go around the circle. Keep it fast. Ben, Monte Morris, what would you do?
Yeah, I think I'd bring him back if you could. And the 3 guys we're going to talk about are all kind of creators off the bench, playmakers. They're essentially all point guards in some way or another. Well, I guess in Morris McLaughlin's case, they are point guards, but they need somebody to be the straw that stirs the drink off the bench. And Monte Morris is actually the one that he's going to need more than the vet minimum, but you may be able to get him for what they have available in terms of their mid-level exception, which I believe they still get part of this year. And maybe Jack, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they still get like $5 million or something. And so I think he's realistic to keep. And I think he is somebody who Connolly likes, obviously, and fits what they need. He can make threes. He can orchestrate the offense. So I think he's a realistic guy to keep. And I don't know that you're going to do much better in terms of a backup point guard, assuming he's, once he gets a year, he hurt the quad or whatever it was last October. He clearly wasn't 100%. And, he's not yet, he's not over 30, right? He's still relatively young. So I think that he makes a ton of sense to bring back.
Ron. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I would say yes, bring him back. He's 28 years old. You look at what you haven't seen yet is fully healthy. How does he fit into this offense? Mike Conley being up in age. Can he come in and give you some crucial minutes to give him a quick breather? But turnover to scoring ratio, is it going to be good enough? And I'd say, yeah, if you have to pay a little bit more for him, like Ben bought up, it might be worth it because again, and then I agree with Reggie, or I'm glad Reggie saw what I saw. When I originally thought about Cat, I'm like, yeah, trade him. And then I looked at what's out there. I'm like, oh, brother, no, what is that? Ooh, what is that? Like so same thing. Monte Morris, I think when we got him, everybody was like, okay, this could be a big help. He seemed like he was helpful. So yeah, I would bring him back.
Jack.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one just because I think there was some lack of alignment between Chris Finch and Tim Connolly there on that move. I mean, there were just plenty of opportunities that called for Monte Morris to play more in the postseason, and Finch and his staff just did not elect to do so. I definitely think that bring him back if you can swing it financially is a smart move. Just giving him a full offseason, a full training camp to get more acclimated and feel more comfortable, especially as a scorer offensively. So yeah, I'd certainly want him back. I just think that it was unfortunate there wasn't kind of complete alignment after that trade.
Reg.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jack. I was gonna say that, like, he didn't play as much as I was expecting him to play, especially down the stretch, for a guy who could light it up from three and who could give you good minutes. Like, I was expecting a little bit more from him. But then when we talk about some of these other free agents, if they can't bring some of those guys back, or they don't bring some of those guys back, I think his role increases a little bit more. If Finchy likes him enough, I guess. But yeah, I would bring him back at whatever the number that is necessary to do it, and increase his minutes.
Yeah, I think it could come down, and I don't know this for a fact. It might come down to a choice between Monte Morris and our next guy, Jordan McLaughlin. Both kind of undersized guards. Neither of them played much in the postseason, but Jordan McLaughlin coming off a 47% three-point shooting season. Ron Johnson, start with you. Jordan McLaughlin, the fan favorite. What would you do?
I'm torn with this one. I mean, I think, again, bringing guys back when you make it as far as you did, clearly there's some chemistry there. There's some things there. McLaughlin down the stretch, though, was weird to me. Like, there was times where I thought he should have taken a shot, didn't take it late in the buzzer, and had a shot clock violation. It only happened a few times, but to me, that's glaring to not be ready to just let it go. When you think about Steve Kerr, how he came off the bench, or Vinny the Microwave Johnson with the Pistons. That's what I always think about, a guy that's supposed to come off and give you instant buckets and just do what you do and then go back and sit down. That's the one where I'd be like, what else is out there? I would take a second look at some of these other guys. When you look at the Denver Nuggets bench, when you look at the Mavs bench, and some of the other teams that had some really good bench players come off and give them some key minutes and points, I wouldn't be opposed to that one.
I wish I had a better gut instinct on cost. I have no clue what the going rate is for, a 28-year-old who can light it up from three, who's super undersized, but is like a very smooth ball handler who can run an offense. I don't know. I don't know what he costs. Maybe Jack Borman can help me with that.
Yeah, I think it would probably be a veteran minimum deal once again for Jordan McLaughlin, or something slightly above that, like he was on previously. I personally think that Jordan McLaughlin has probably the highest percentage chance of being back of any of these guys, in part because of that, but also because, he plays exactly the way that Chris Finch wants guys to play, with making extremely quick decisions. I know he shot 47% from three on only 89 attempts this season, but even if he's shooting like 35, 38%, that's still huge considering what else he brings. So I'd love to see Jordan McLaughlin back. I think, like I said, probably the highest percent chance of any of these three guys to be back.
Reg?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him back. It's just tough, though, because I feel like, where are the minutes? And also, even with the 47%, I feel like there are times, when he gets into the game and, he's cold, he's not necessarily in a rhythm, and the shots don't fall consistently. So I'm interested to see, if he does come back, then how is he used? Because we haven't seen some of the consistency that we would like to see. That being said, Chris Finch loves the guy. Like, he loves him almost as much as he loves slow-mo.
We'll get to him. Ben?
Yeah, I co-sign on bringing him back. I mean, you're not going to do better for a third point guard vet minimum guy. I mean, I don't know that there's like a third string point guard rankings anywhere, but like he'd be one of the better ones, right? Like they're just for a stretch there before the calf injury, really early last season, 22-23. I mean, he was playing unbelievably well. Like we've seen him get hot from three. We've seen the crazy assisted turnover streaks. For as far as an insurance security blanket, third point guard, if he's a vet minimum, which I think he is, makes a ton of sense to bring him back. He's just not going to be your primary backup point guard. He's going to be like your 11th guy and Chris Finch's security blanket. And like I said, you're not going to do much better.
All right, last guy. I want 30 seconds each on Kyle Anderson. I assume probably the most costly of the free agents. He's coming off $8-9 million salary, a career worst from three. So the opposite of McLaughlin. We'll start with Jack. What do you do with Slow-Mo?
Yeah, I'd say bring him back. I'd try the hardest to bring Slow-Mo back. I think over the course of a season, it's really important. He also said in his exit interview that his son is on the spectrum and is really doing well in the Minnesota school system that he's in, which is really important. And I think it's just a human element that factors into this decision as well for him, is that I think he'll want to be back if he can. I know he really loves playing here. He loves Chris Finch, loves his teammates. So, yeah, I really hope he's back because I think he's really important over the course of an 82-game season and then into the playoffs like we saw against Dallas.
Reggie?
I think before the Dallas series, I would say probably not. But then after the Dallas series, I'm like, well, maybe. I would be interested to see what the financials look like. And also, yeah, as Jack said, the human element with his son being on the spectrum, like we have some good resources here in Minnesota to help with that. So I'm interested to see what that looks like.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think, unfortunately, he's the one that's the least likely to be back, I think, just because of the financial situation. I certainly also think he's the most difficult role to fill. I mean, he'd be the only one of the top 8 rotation guys that wouldn't be back. He's the only one that's not under contract. It's a tough role to fill. He is, as Chris Fitch has called him many times, a Swiss Army knife on both ends of the floor. I mean, he can run offense. He can guard multiple positions. He was big in the Dallas series, as Reggie said. So I don't think he'll be back, mainly because of the financials, but it's certainly going to be a challenge to try and, pull up what Denver tried to do this year, is backfill veteran role with younger players or on the cheap. So if they can bring him back, like, that would be huge.
And Ron?
Yeah, Sam, I hate the slow play game of his, but I will say in the playoffs, I was very impressed with his defensive prowess, his ability to stop some of the bigger forwards and still stay in front of some of the guards. Not great, but he did kind of really piss a lot of people off. And so I would say, if you can, that's the one guy of those three. If you can only pick one, that would be my one out of the three I would keep.
Yeah. If you're going to splurge on one guy, that might be the guy to do it on. And again, I don't know if he's increased in value, decreased in value since that last contract he signed. He's 2 years older now. He's over 30. Maybe they can get a little bit of a hometown discount on him. But going forward on the basketball party, we'll talk about outside free agents that we might want to bring in for the Timberwolves to fill out this roster. We'll also get into some draft preview stuff as well. That is fast approaching. Fun show, guys. We covered a lot of ground. Ben Beacon, Locked On Wolves. Ron Johnson of The Ron Johnson Show, Jack Borman, Candace Hoopus, and Reggie Wilson, Carol Evans Sports Director. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thanks a lot for watching and listening to the Locked On Wolves podcast feed, and we will talk to you soon. See ya.